Hello viewers, let us discuss today the topic Fordism, post-Fordism and production systems. In fact, production systems either are based on mass production system or flexible and specialized production system. Now, depending on the needs of time and economic development, different societies and economic systems favor the mass production methods or specialized production methods, depending also on the consumerist culture. Now, Fordism and post-Fordism developed in the 20th century to identify different methods of production mechanism in factories. In this module, we'll try to analyze the concept of Fordism, how did Fordism originate, and the features of Fordist production system. Thereafter, we will discuss the post-Fordist mechanism, the features of post-Fordist style of production system, and finally, we will wrap up the discussion with a comparative analysis of Fordism and post-Fordist production system. What is Fordism? Fordism is a type of production system that originated in the first half of the 20th century by the very famous Henry Ford, who was the owner of the American Ford Company. Fordism is designated to describe the system of mass production system that was pioneered in the early 20th century by, as I just mentioned, Henry Ford himself. The typical post-war mode of economic growth and its associated political and economic order in advanced capitalist countries also encompasses Fordism. The concept of Fordism became extremely popular during the 1920s, wherein brought about mass production system following the assembly line system of production. Now, what are the features of typical Fordist system of production? Firstly, as an industrial paradigm, it involves mass production of standardized goods on a moving assembly line using dedicated machinery and semi-skilled labor. Fordist mass production is typically based on a technical division of labor that is organized along Taylorist lines, subject in its immediate production phase to mechanical pacing by moving assembly line techniques, and organized overall on the supply-driven principle that production must be unbroken and in long runs to secure economies of scale. In this system, production becomes very cheap and the products become inexpensive because of the mass production system. The assembly line itself mainly exploits the semi-skilled labor, or who are called the mass workers. But that does not mean other types of workers, say foremen, designers, technicians, are not used. They are used and employed elsewhere within the system itself. In addition, Fordism ideally involves systematic control by the same firm of all stages of production and accumulation, right from procuring the raw materials to marketing of the product. It is done by the same firm. Second feature of Fordism is national accumulation. It involves a virtuous cycle of mass production and mass consumption. So, production is also on a large scale. Consumption also follows the same scale of production. Fordism's virtuous cycle involves rising productivity based on economies of scale in mass production. It also involves rising incomes linked to rising productivity. It also includes increased mass demand due to rising wages, increased profits based on full utilization of capacity, increased investment in improved mass production equipment and techniques, and a further rise in productivity. The third feature of Fordism is the mode of regulation. Fordism comprises an institutionalized compromise between organized labor, and big business, whereby workers accept management prerogatives in return for rising wages. Monopolistic competition between large firms based on cost plus pricing as well as advertising. Centralized financial capital, deficit finance, and credit-based mass consumption patterns. State intervention to secure full employment and establish a welfare state system. And finally, the embedding of national economies in a liberal international economic order. Fourthly, Fordism also has an impact on the societal system. As a form of social life, Fordism is characterized by mass media, mass transport, and mass politics. Considered as a generic mode of societalization, which means a pattern of institutional integration and social cohesion. The organization of social life is more and more premised on the fact that the vast majority of the population depend on an individual or social wage to satisfy their needs from cradle to grave. Fordism promotes two complementary trends in consumption. First, growing consumption of standardized mass-produced commodities in nuclear family households. So there is a rise in the consumption pattern of the families. Secondly, provision of standardized collective goods and services by a bureaucratic state. Another dimension of societalization is spatial patterning, which means that countries, towns and cities are organized into industrial residential areas as well as factory areas, which means that there is a growth of core industrial regions comprising large metropolitan areas surrounded by networks of small industrial belts. These regions were dominated by the leading Fordist firms and their suppliers. They drew in raw materials on a growing scale, migrant or foreign labor from the rest of the world, and churned out mass-produced goods for global markets. Therefore, what we found is that the migration of laborers from rural to urban areas to industrialized cities is also an impact of the Fordist system of production. This method of production not only has its impact on the political system, the economic system, as well as the societal system, but this system of mass production and mass consumption cannot go on for a long time. What happened as a result was there was a crisis of Fordism because of this mass system of production and consumption. This system became dominant in advanced capitalist countries during post-war reconstruction and is also credited by facilitating long post-war boom. Now, during the 1970s, what could be identified in advanced capitalist countries was a crisis of Fordism. The growing potential of mass production was gradually exhausted because there's a limit to which you can produce goods in mass quantities. And there was an intensified working class resistance to its alienating working conditions. The market for mass consumer durables became saturated. A declining profit rate coincided with stagflation. A financial crisis developed. Internationalization made state economic management less effective. Now, what happened was a crisis in the fact that clients began to reject the standardized mass-produced goods. They also rejected the bureaucratic treatment in the welfare state. And here we find the American economic dominance and political hegemony were threatened by European and East Asian expansion. These phenomena prompted a wide-ranging search for solutions to the crisis of Fordism. So what next? There were two options which were open, either by restoring its typical growth dynamics to produce a neo-Fordist regime or by developing a new post-Fordist accumulation regime and a mode of regulation. So the only way to come out of this crisis of Fordism was to find out a new way of production and consumption. Now, Fordist system of production not only benefited production, consumption patterns or societal distribution, it also had a long-term impact on media and culture. Fordism has been associated with terms like commodification, bureaucratization, social homogenization and individualization. This is reflected not only in the economic and political life but also the cultural life of the citizens around the globe. Indeed, since mass production means standardization of the product as well as mass consumption, it was associated with a whole range of new aesthetic and a commodification of culture. This produced a triumphant high modernism in art, architecture, literature and design as they came to express a corporatist capitalist version of the enlightened project of development for progress and human emancipation. Thus, Fordism had its impact on culture and media also. Since the 1970s, we find a new system of production system emerging, and that is called the post-Fordist system of production, which on the contrary is associated with flexible system of production and specialized production mechanism. Post-Fordism is the name given to the dominant system of economic production, consumption and associated socio-economic phenomena in most industrial countries since the late 20th century. It is contrasted with Fordism, that is the system that we just learned right now, in which workers work on a production line, performed specialized tasks repeatedly. Definition of the nature and scope of post-Fordism vary considerably and a matter of debate among scholars around the world. Post-Fordism refers to flexible, specialized system of production. In the early 1970s, the concept of Fordism switched from mass production to specialized production due to globalization and competition in the foreign markets. At that period of time, the old system of mass production of identical products, inexpensive products through specialized labor became uncompetitive and people were not ready to buy those mass products. They were looking for a change in products, they were looking for specialization in products. Most principles of post-Fordism interestingly originated in Japan. Later on, other capitalist countries adopted the same post-Fordist style of production system as they could see the success of Japanese business. Manufacturers used new technology, particularly computers, to make manufacturing more flexible. Moreover, they produced small batches, economically reducing the cost used in an assembly line. Most importantly, the post-Fordist system of production system is associated with innovation and technological specialization, which helped the industry to meet the changing demands of the consumers. Although the prices of specialized products were higher than the identical mass products, there was more demands from consumers to specialized products, and what followed was that the demand for mass products kept on declining. Companies required more flexible and skilled workers to adapt to post-Fordism concept in their companies. At the same time, post-Fordism created a new innovation and a systemic change in organizational structures. Let us now study the main features of post-Fordism. Post-Fordism is usually associated with small batch production, economies of scope, specialized products and jobs, new information technologies, emphasis on types of consumers in contrast to previous emphasis on a social class buying a particular social product, the rise of the service and the white-collared workers, that is the tertiary sector, and most importantly, the feminization of the workforce, which implies a rising level of women workers joining the workforce, not just in institutional innovative sectors, but also in skilled and semi-skilled areas. Social scientists adopted three main approaches to identify the post-Fordist regime. The first approach emphasized on the focus on the transformative role of new technologies and practices regarding material and immaterial production, especially new information and communication technologies and their role in facilitating a more flexible, networked global economy. Basically, post-Fordism emphasized on use of innovative information technological tools. Secondly, there was a focus on the leading economic sectors that enable a transition from mass industrial production to post-industrial production. And thirdly, a focus on how major crisis tendencies of Fordism are resolved through the consolidation of a new and stable series of economic and extra-economic institutions and the forms of governance that the rise facilitate and consolidate of profitable new production of processes, markets, and products. However, even decades after the crisis of Fordism emerged in the mid-1970s, debates continue about whether a stable post-Fordist order has really emerged or not, whether Fordist stability was a parenthesis in an otherwise disorderly, crisis-prone capitalist system of the world. Now, how does post-Fordism impact production systems? Post-Fordism, as I just said, is associated with flexible production based on flexible machines or systems, and there should be a flexible workforce. So there's flexibility in the entire production and distribution system. A stable mode of growth based on flexible production, economies of scope, rising income for skilled labor and more demand for skilled laboring, increased demand among the better off segment of the society who want better products at a higher price, reinvestment in more flexible production equipment and techniques, and more importantly, new sets of products flooding the market every few months. Growing economic polarization between multi-skilled and the unskilled workforce, together with a decline in national or industrial collective bargaining. The rise of flexible, lean, networked firms that focus on their core competencies, build strategic alliances, and what we find in the post-Fordist production system is a tendency to outsource most of their activities. So what we find is shorter, precise, lean production system with a very specialized and skilled workforce. We also find another very interesting tendency in post-Fordism, that is the dominance of hypermobile, rootless private bank credit and the form of cyber cash that circulate internationally. So the entire credit system is also related to post-Fordist flexible production mechanism. The subordination of government finance to international money and currency markets. A shift from post-war welfare states to a system where we have flexible, market-friendly forms of economic and social governance. In fact, the states have become more market-friendly and their contribution towards state welfare is gradually declining. Increasing concern with governing local, regional, supranational as well as regional economies. Now, is there a relationship between post-Fordism and international political economy? Yes. There is a relationship between flexible production system and how politics and economy cooperate and supplement each other. Post-Fordism entails an evolution in many aspects of international political economy, primarily the methods of production, the labor force, as well as the product market, not to forget the consumers. The new era saw the methods of production shift from the production line approach that was adopted by Henry Ford and move towards the use of skilled laborers which help produce specialized products. Such a shift also resulted in the introduction of the use of women within the labor force and the feminization of the products these labor forces created. The introduction of the influence of gender displays the importance of gendered approach to post-Fordism and international political economy. The post-Fordist model of production signaled a move from the conceptualization of the consumer market as a whole towards the idea of market, which is built by individuals comprised of different ideas and opinions. We can see the ideas that are generated through different startups also contribute to flexible and specialized market production system. The shift from broad conceptualization of the population towards an individual approach is mirrored in the literature's focus on the role of women in the entire post-Fordist era. Now, what is more interesting to observe is that there have been new methods of production and the ability of these new mechanisms to satisfy the consumer temporarily, the post-Fordist era capitalized on the contemporary nature of the consumer market. In fact, the post-Fordist system of production and the firms, they try to capitalize on the contemporary aspirations of the consumers and try to meet their current expectations and not try to fulfill their long-term high-end production systems. So what we find is there is a shift in trying to fulfill the aspirations of the consumer market. For example, if you just look into goods sector such as homewares, clothing, technology, these are advertised through contemporary technological advancements of the era, and they use the mediums such as television, social media, etc. that are generally not associated with the product itself. In fact, advertisements create the craze for product and consumers buy the product after being lured by continuous advertisement. This is an impact of post-Fordist system of production. Through the new means of advertisement, it was now possible for a firm to mold the consumer's needs and effectively provide the consumer market with the product that is desperately wanted. So the need is created, the aspiration is created through advertisement, and then the product is launched in the market. This is what we mean by post-Fordist specialized system of production process. The commodification of goods through the use of advertising has created an increasingly materialistic consumer market, whereas firms have capitalized on the consumer's materialist desires. So we can see that post-Fordism has contributed to consumerist aspirations and desires, and the consumerist market is created by the post-Fordist flexible production system. Let us now try to differentiate between Fordism and post-Fordism. What are the main areas of difference between these two production systems? Now, on the basis of definition, we find that Fordism generally refers to large-scale production system, while post-Fordism refers to flexible, specialized production system. So far as the nature of production is concerned, Fordism focuses on mass production, while post-Fordism focuses on production in small batches. So far as nature of products are concerned, Fordism focuses on standardized products, while post-Fordism focuses on specialized products. So far as training for workforce is concerned, Fordism does not offer much ground for training of the workforce, whereas training is an essential part of post-Fordist system of production. In fact, so far as nature of work is concerned, Fordism provides for repetitive work. The same kind of work has to be done by the worker every day, but post-Fordism offers scope for specialized and flexible work patterns. So far as job security is concerned, in fact, in Fordism, we have less security, while post-Fordism provides for more secure job because of this era of specialization. Cost of products in Fordism is cheap, inexpensive, while the cost of products in post-Fordism system of production is highly expensive. Use of technology, we find Fordism does not rely on use of expensive, innovative technologies, but post-Fordism is essentially based on high investments on technological innovations. Let us conclude with the fact that Fordism and post-Fordism have emerged in different periods of history in order to cater to the system of production, distribution, market, and the consumers. These periods do not have a specific starting or ending dates, and these can be viewed differently. The period of Fordism is named after the Ford Motor Company in the US, who developed a specific model of industrial production which was replicated by others. The period after the Second World War between 1945 and the 1970s has been identified as the core period of Fordism, while post-Fordist period refers to the period of flexible and specialized production system that started somewhere around post-1970s. Both periods can be seen as eras, and the transition from one era to another era has been reflected in the transition from a Keynesian economic system to one where neoliberalism is the dominant political and economic ideology. Thus, we can safely summarize that Fordism is a system of mass production, mass consumption system which developed in a period which called for standardized products. But post-Fordism relied on flexible and specialized production system which also catered to the needs of the rising aspirations of the consumerist culture, focusing on the greater role of media and advertisement in ensuring that products reach out to the consumers. However, both Fordism and post-Fordism have played an important and a significant role in providing a major change in production system around the world in different periods of history. Thank you.